Story number 1. During my college years, I found myself working at a 24-hour wall-bound store, a shift that often fell on the unfortunate few. Despite my youthful age of 20 and my school commitments, I naively believed my boss would spare me from overnight shifts. However, she must have seen an opportunity when I revealed my availability on Mondays and Wednesdays. It was then that I received the dreaded schedule: Tuesday night, 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. I had to double-check to believe it. Feeling sickened, I confronted my supervisor, only to learn that as an adult, I had little choice. Reluctantly, I decided to endure this one shift and then plead my case to prioritize my studies. As the clock struck midnight on that fateful Tuesday, I relieved my coworker, Amanda. With half the store's lights dimmed to save electricity, I was surprised to find a steady stream of customers during the early hours. However, past 1 a.m., the store grew eerily quiet, with only a handful of patrons in an entire hour. As the night wore on, the customers dwindled to almost none by 2 a.m., leaving me bored out of my mind. Seeking some purpose, I noticed a bald man, who seemed like a manager, repeatedly passing by the front registers with a set of keys dangling from his khakis and a small backpack in hand. I approached him and asked if he was the manager, to which he affirmed. He requested that I head to the back warehouse to organize pallets, claiming he would watch the front. With uncertainty, I complied. As I ventured toward the warehouse, I noticed him doing something to the store's entrance, as if locking it. Inside the warehouse, I encountered another man, Rob, who identified himself as the night manager. Confused, I described the bald man, but Rob insisted he was the sole manager on duty. Before we could investigate further, the store's lights abruptly went out. Rob instructed me to wait in the warehouse while he assessed the situation. From there, I observed him walking into the dark store, illuminated only by the dairy cooler's lights. As I sat on a pallet box, nervously texting friends about the situation, I heard footsteps approaching from within the warehouse. A voice called out, "Hey kid, you in here?" Yet, it wasn't Rob's voice, it belonged to the bald man. I hastily left the warehouse, cautiously making my way to the front of the store, desperately searching for Rob but finding no sign of him. I called his name in vain, and then I tried to exit, but the door was locked. Panic set in as I heard footsteps closing in from behind, only to discover it was Rob. He unlocked the door, urging me to hurry outside. Once outside, Rob immediately called the police, informing them about a potential armed intruder locked inside wall bounds. I added my concerns, fearing for my safety in the warehouse. The police arrived swiftly, and while I watched from my car, they entered the store. With no visible action from within, I eventually left the scene. I returned to work, but the overnight shift became a thing of the past after a conversation with my boss. She shared security footage that showed the bald man's suspicious actions, cutting the lights, circling the store, and heading to the warehouse. That was the most chilling part, knowing that he directed me to the very spot he intended to access. Fortunately, the footage also showed him leaving through the emergency exit long before the police arrived. I continued working at the store for a few more months, never knowing if the man was ever identified or apprehended. Nevertheless, I never worked another overnight shift again. Story number 2. I used to work as a night restock worker at a supermarket in a somewhat rural town. The store was called Great American, and it was the biggest and best supermarket in the area. My shift would begin as soon as the store closed at 10 p.m., and I'd work until 3 a.m., restocking the shelves and organizing everything before the next operating day. Of course, I had the keys to the store for after-hours access, and it would be a team of two, myself and one other, either Terry Carter or Alfonso. Tonight, I was supposed to be working with Terry. I arrived at the store and let myself into the back where all the inventory awaited restocking. I began my work, using the pallet jack to bring a whole pallet of boxes out to the shopping floor. I started with the bread and nuts aisle, rotating the older loaves to the front and placing the newer ones in the back. Halfway through, I realized I hadn't seen Terry yet. I walked to the back area of the store where we left our belongings, but he wasn't there yet. I left the back door cracked open with a door stopper for him when he would show up, so I went back to work for another half hour. Still, there was no sign of Terry. I once again went to the back of the store, but he wasn't there either. However, I noticed that the back door was shut, which was odd, considering I had left it open with the door stopper. I assumed Terry must have kicked it outside instead of bringing it in. I called out Terry's name, and it echoed through the room, but he didn't respond. So, I decided to give him a call. He picked up, sounding like he was in bed, and I asked if he was at work. To my surprise, he said he wasn't coming in tonight because he was sick. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine. I told him that someone had kicked the door stopper off the door, and he casually mentioned that it might have come undone by itself. Nobody else was scheduled to work that night. Despite his explanation, I wasn't entirely convinced, as I remembered securing the door stopper tightly. I did a quick look around to make sure no one was in the back of the store, and when I didn't find anyone, I returned to work. However, a lingering sense of unease accompanied me. I continued stocking the remainder of the bread when I heard a loud sound echoing from across the shopping floor. At that point, I knew someone had to be in the store with me. I got up from my knees, and as I stood in the middle aisle that intersected all the others, I looked straight down. On the opposite side of the store, in the dairy aisle, I saw a man dressed in black walking past the middle aisle, looking in my direction. My heart sank as I remembered that scene from the movie Signs, where an alien walks past a birthday party. Trying to rationalize the situation, I thought maybe this was someone else filling in for Terry's shift, someone our boss hadn't told me about. I started to speed walk down the center aisle and yelled loudly, "Excuse me." I looked left down every aisle I passed, as he had gone towards the front of the store. In one of those aisles, he stood waiting at the end, fully facing my direction. When he saw me, he walked out of sight in the direction I had come from. I yelled again, "Excuse me," and started running down the aisle to catch up to him, determined to get a good look at his face. As I reached the front of the aisle near the cash registers, I looked down the direction he had gone and saw him all the way at the end by the bread aisle. Half of his body was hidden behind a shelf, his mouth hanging open, and he started to wave me over. However, he didn't say a word, and his face sent shivers down my spine. I attempted one more time to speak to him, asking, "Who are you?" He disappeared behind the shelf. I wasn't being paid enough to deal with this situation, so I quickly went outside to sit in my car and called my boss. He answered, and I informed him about the random person roaming around the store. My boss advised me to either get him out of the store if I could or call the police. I wasn't about to physically remove a potentially dangerous person, so I dialed 911. I waited in my car until a police car arrived, greeted the officer, and asked him to follow me inside. We walked around the store, searching for the man, and saw him in one of the aisles again, standing there as if playing a bizarre game. When the police officer commanded him to come over, he surprisingly obeyed. The man was handcuffed and appeared strange. He kept smiling and staring at me, licking his lips, with huge bags under his eyes. The only words he spoke were when answering the police officer, claiming he was looking for a snack. I didn't like the way he looked at me, with that menacing, threatening smile that still haunts me to this day. After the police officer walked him outside to his car, I resumed my work. Needless to say, I never left any of the doors open again.